Stages Houston is always putting on amazing performances, and Das Barbecue is no different. This comedy is going to have you stomping your feet, slapping your knees, and laughing out loud. It reimagines Wagner's epic music drama, The Ring Cycle, as a hilarious Texas hootenanny. By the way, I've always wanted to say hootenanny out loud. Say it with me, hootenanny. Das Barbecue is playing now through June 1st, so get your tickets and watch 5 incredible actors transformed into over 30 outrageous characters. Hold on to your hats, y'all, and get your tickets at stageshouston.com today. Want to make a real difference in just 1 hour? Join the Harris County chapter of Gals Who Give on May 13th for their quarterly event from 7 to 8 p.m. at 249 West 19th Street in Houston. This is really cool. All you have to do is bring a blank $100 check, nominate a local nonprofit, then 3 charities are randomly selected to present, and 1 will walk away with the full pot. And you'll get a tax receipt. Join them and make a real change. Learn more at galswhogive.org and click on the Harris County chapter in the upper right. Today on CityCast Houston, things are not looking good for the local economy. Oil prices are falling, and consumers, including myself, are cutting back on spending. I hate to say we're headed for a recession, but just in case, I'm bringing on Chris Tomlinson, Houston Chronicle's business columnist, to give us his tips to survive a recession in Houston. It's Monday, May 5th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Chris, what exactly is a recession? I know it's bad, and I'm bracing for it, and it seems like everyone else is, but what is it?
Well, technically, a economic recession is when the economy shrinks for 3 consecutive months. And it's something that a team of economists in Washington at the National Bureau of Economic Research, they're the ones who kind of make the official call of when a recession takes place. But for the average Houstonian, it means less work. It means layoffs. It means the inability to make money. If you work a lot of overtime, it means less overtime. If you struggle to get your 40 hours a week at your job, well, it's going to be even tougher because there's less transactions going on. There's fewer stuff being sold. There's less work to be done, and everyone feels the pain.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those things that there's multiple factors, obviously, right? But like for you personally, is there an indicator or a factor that you look at and you're like, oh yeah, we are heading towards the R word?
It mostly has to do with economic activity, right? It's things like retail sales. When people stop going to the mall and stop buying so much clothing or other goods, that's a sign that a recession is coming. When unemployment begins to inch up, and we see people losing their jobs, and it's harder for them to find new jobs, that's another indicator that a recession is underway. And in Texas, the biggest indicator is the price for a barrel of crude oil. When the price of oil goes down, that means there's less demand. That means less activity in the oil and gas industry. And it's the oil and gas industry that really sets the Houston economy apart from the rest of the country.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Now, Chris, I care about money. I love saving money, but I'm not an economist. So how would you break it down for an average Houstonian?
I think for your average Houstonian, it's about what's happening in your life. It's about how much more money is coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you working those extra hours or are you not?
Okay.
Are you worried about losing your job? Are there layoffs at work? I can talk about these big, highfalutin economic indicators all day, but that's not what really counts for your average Texan.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, how secure do I feel in how much money I'm going to make in the future? How much can I afford to spend? And is my buying slowing down? Am I buying less stuff? You know, I think that's probably the best way for an individual Texan to kind of judge.
Is there a personal factor for you, like in your life, where are you buying less stuff, or are you looking at something like I want Chris's indicator, like when you are looking at your personal finances or looking at the market and you're going, oh yeah, this factor is definitely showing recession?
I'm a business opinion writer for a newspaper, right? So
Yeah.
I'm always a little on edge.
Yeah, of course.
I'm paid to look at those indicators. So I think for me, retail sales is a big warning sign, right? When people stop buying stuff, it tells me that they're holding on to their money or they're not making as much money. And that with unemployment, I think those are the two things.
Are you always stressed out because of what you just mentioned? Like you're always looking at this stuff. Are you making big purchases in general, or are you always on edge?
I I'm not making really big purchases.
Yeah.
I confess, I have a 60th birthday this year,
Oh, nice.
and so I'm going to be celebrating with a big blowout vacation.
Okay.
But outside of that, I'm holding back.
Okay. Yeah.
Recessions are a normal part of the business cycle. We live in a capitalist economy. The government doesn't control things. And in this kind of economy, there's a constant cycle.
Mhm.
There's a boom and a bust and a boom and a bust. And we actually have been going pretty long time now without a recession.
Yeah.
And so in some ways we're overdue. And I think for me, when I think about my anxiety around a recession, it's because it's time. And then when you add in all of the economic policies coming out of the White House, it's multiplied times 1,000.
One energy fellow at the University of Houston actually predicted that Houston's going to be in a recession by the summer. Chris, how are you feeling about that? What do you think?
By summer might be a little too soon.
Okay.
And this all goes back to the price of oil. For Texas to make money, we need to constantly be drilling new oil wells, finding new reservoirs, and employing the engineers, the petroleum engineers, the geoscientists, the roughnecks, the people who build the oil wells. And for that to continue, we need about $65 per barrel to be the annual average. President Donald Trump has talked about wanting to push the price of oil down to $50 to supercharge the rest of the economy. And if that were to happen, it would definitely send Houston and Texas into a recession, while boosting the economy maybe in the rest of the country. Most experts right now are predicting $55 oil on average for 2026. And that's when Houston's going to get hit with a recession if that happens.
That's such a Houston thing that the rest of the country is going to be doing great while we struggle because oil and gas is so big for us.
Well, and on the flip side, when oil and gas prices go up, the rest of the country suffers and we make a lot of money, right? So this is that constant cycle.
Oh, man. I remember a couple summers ago when gas was so expensive and oil was expensive as well. I felt like I was struggling both, Chris. Like I didn't see any benefit from that.
If you're not directly employed by the oil and gas industry, it's hard to notice.
Yeah.
But when so many people in Houston work in that industry, when times are good, they're going out to restaurants. They're going to, the convention for the offshore technology conference is spending millions of dollars in the economy, helping hotels and restaurants and retailers. And that goes throughout the community. That goes to small businesses that buy advertising at the Houston Chronicle or buy advertising on CityCast. It's a much more indirect thing. But I promise you, if we have $55 oil next year, you'll feel that even though you're not directly employed by it.
I'm terrified, Chris. You scared me right now. And, it sounds like 2026 is when it could impact us. And, and let's say if it comes sooner, right? Like if there is a recession around the corner, what are some things that we should not do, right? Like what is something we should avoid or things that we should avoid as Houstonians?
I've been writing about this because of the turmoil in the financial markets. About half of Americans invest their retirement savings in the stock market. And the stock market has been making these huge leaps up, these huge swings down. Right now, we're still on a down. We're not as far down as we were, but we're still down compared to the beginning of the year. And so the first thing is not to let these momentary swings panic you.
Yeah.
You know, if the stock market drops, don't go into your 401k or your retirement account and sell all of your S&P 500 index funds, right? That's probably where your money is. It's the smart place to put your money, but you can't time the market. So sure, you could get out now, but you don't know when to get back in.
Yeah.
And certainly not with this president.
I was going to say, yeah, you never know with President Trump.
Right. And he's calling the shots right now. Wall Street is reacting to him. When he says there's 145% tariffs on China, the market plummets. You know, Trump is now backing off his tariffs, and there are hints out of the White House that they're not going to be as severe as we thought. But, you know, it can go up and down, and we really don't know what's going to happen next.
Okay.
So unless you're inside Trump's brain, just leave your retirement account alone. That's the first step.
So that's one tip right there. What's another one?
Pay down your debts. I mean, this is a good thing to do in the best of times and in the worst of times. Is if you've got credit card debt, that is bad for you. You're paying way too much in interest. You need to pay that off, and so that interest is not going out the door. That is one less expense you have to pay every month. So pay down your debts and build up at least 6 months, preferably 1 year of expense money.
Yeah.
Right. So that if you do lose your job, you're not in an instant panic. And I understand most Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. And that is a tragedy. And it's something that will really cause you trouble if we have a recession and you're having a hard time finding enough work.
And saving for 6 months, ideally up to a year, you mean being able to pay the mortgage, car note if you have it, and any other expensive bills around the house. Speaking of car notes, this is one where I wanted to ask you. Obviously, the mortgage, that is one debt that you keep. But what about car notes? Because that's one that I'm having a tough time with. Like, do we just pay off the car? Do we still keep making payments on it with a recession looming?
The rule about debt is that if you take on debt to buy something that becomes more valuable over time, that's a good idea. So for instance, I may be paying 3, 4, even 6% mortgage, but if the value of my home is going up 7, 8% a year, then I'm actually making money on that. You know, and if you're going to hold on to your home for 10 or 20 years, you can expect to see that kind of return on your investment. So that's why we say mortgages are good debts. Credit cards, you know, that stuff, it's already gone. It's already worthless. You're not going to be able to sell what you bought with a credit card for more than what you paid for it. That's why that's bad debt. Car notes fall into that category. Buying an automobile is a huge expense, and most people need to take a loan to do that. But if you can, pay off that car loan as fast as possible. And, you know, something that one of my mentors told me 25 years ago was, you know, never take out a car loan unless you have to. And so for a long time now, I have been saving my money to buy a car 5, 10 years in advance.
Okay.
So that when I need to buy a car, I've got cash in the bank. I pay cash for that car and I don't have a loan. And then I immediately start putting that money that would go to a car loan into my savings account.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up is, you know, depending on the interest rate, of course, and interest rates are unfortunately still very high. You know, you're looking at 5%, 6% for a car loan. But when they were like 2.9, 3.9 and your savings account is actually giving you 5%, then at that point you take on that car loan and, you know, the rest of the money you put in that savings account, you're still making a 1%, 2% profit. But right now it's tough because interest rates aren't helping any of this either, Chris. And it seems like we're all hurting because of interest rates too.
Interest rates are the biggest challenge for the American consumers.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's kind of on purpose right now. Just a few years ago, we were complaining about inflation, how fast prices were going up. It seemed like, we talked a lot about the price of eggs. The eggs were going up so fast, so many goods, so many things we needed to buy, the prices were rising quickly. Well, the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, uses interest rates to kind of push down economic activity, to kind of make you spend less. And
Hmm.
so they hike the interest rates to make you spend less. And when you spend less, it slows down
Yeah.
inflation. And so, yeah, it's hurting us as individuals to pay higher interest rates, but it is part of a grander scheme to bring down inflation across the country.
H-Town really comes alive in spring, and especially in the heart of our city, downtown Houston. There's so much to do, so grab your crew and explore everything downtown Houston has to offer. From their vibrant parks to their sizzling food scene, and of course, those amazing free outdoor events all season long. Want to just gather the family and hang out like I enjoy doing? Downtown Houston has you covered. Head to Market Square Park or Trebley Park for kid-friendly games, movies under the stars, and so much more. To really be in the know, text downtown to 56512, where you'll find maps, the best parking spots, special events, and more. You can also find all of the fun and free events at downtownhouston.org. Spring is here, so come eat, play, and explore in downtown Houston. Get revived and energized in downtown. We're all looking for a perfect Mother's Day present, so let me tell you about the Aura frame. It was just named the best digital frame by Wirecutter, and I got one for my mom, and she's not that tech savvy, but it was a breeze for her to set up. The best part, once she was connected to the Aura app, all of my siblings and so many cousins all over the country, we started sharing photos with mom right away. Pictures of grandkids, memories from our childhood, and even one from my cousin's wedding where my mom and dad fell asleep during the ceremony. Yeah, I'm definitely keeping that off of Instagram. The picture and video quality is second to none, and Aura frames look good all around the house. Aura has a great deal right now for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's AURA frames.com. Promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Chris, how has Houston previously fared when it comes to recession? Like, I'm thinking about the COVID recession, the Great Recession, or any others that I've missed. How did we fare as a city?
Houston's experience with recessions can be extreme. During the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, Houston specifically and Texas in general did not suffer nearly as much as other parts of the country. And part of that has to do with limits on how large a loan you can take out on your house. We have something called a homestead law here that kind of protects people from taking the equity out of your home. And so we actually did okay during the Great Recession. We suffered, but not nearly as much as, say, people in California or New York or Nevada. During the COVID recession, same thing. COVID recession only lasts maybe a month or two, right?
Yeah.
Because the government spent trillions of dollars, injected trillions of dollars into the economy, made sure that people didn't lose their jobs, made sure we didn't lose our homes. And again, Texas did okay.
Okay.
But what is much more impactful is recessions in Texas specifically because of the loss of oil income. So if you look at 2014 or you look as far back as 1986, when oil prices collapse, we have much more severe consequences. Over 200,000 people lost their jobs in 2014 because of the collapse in oil price.
Wow.
We had 8 million square feet of empty office space in the Houston area because all these oil and gas companies were contracting and laying people off and leaving these office buildings empty. It was something we also saw in 1986. Construction jobs go down, particularly on commercial construction. So that's why I'm saying if you live in Houston, Texas, you need to watch the oil price. And if it stays below $65 a barrel for very long, it's going to hurt the economy here.
Wow, I didn't know it was that bad in 2014. That's crazy. And that wasn't that long ago.
No, but that was also, we went straight into Hurricane Harvey after that, right? In 2015. That was a really tough period for the Houston economy.
I want to go back to the 80s, though, as well. Like, how bad did that one get, that oil bust in the 80s?
Texas, as a state, saw mass layoffs and mass financial failures. There were two things. One is OPEC opened the floodgates, and the price of oil plummeted so low that Texas really couldn't compete anymore. And we almost completely stopped drilling for oil. And that caused all kinds of havoc in the economy, particularly for, manufacturers and people who work with their hands, work on the rigs. We tied that with a savings and loan crisis where there had been some real kind of funny games being played with oil money to drive up the cost of real estate to artificially high levels. And a lot of savings and loans went bankrupt. And suddenly we had literally tens of thousands of homes in foreclosure all over the state being sold off for pennies on the dollar.
What?
It was one of the worst economic crises in Texas history.
How long did it take to rebound?
About 8 years.
Oh my gosh. I moved here in 1990. And I was 5 years old. I had no idea, right? Like none of this was even on my radar. Could something like that ever happen again here?
Anything is possible. I never say never. I think it's more unlikely now because, frankly, the Greater Houston Partnership and mayors and city councils over the years have tried very hard to diversify the Texas economy. So we now have the Texas Medical Center. So more people work in healthcare now than work in oil and gas. Now, that's in terms of total number of jobs. In terms of wealth, oil and gas is still responsible for an enormous amount of wealth coming into Houston. But in terms of jobs, we've diversified. We also have more tech companies. So things are not as concentrated in oil and gas as they were back in the 80s. But, we do live under an economic cycle. And if mismanaged, a recession can be a 3-month bump in the road and we recover quickly, or it can be a massive collapse like what we saw in the 80s.
Do you think our economy now is diversified enough to withstand the ups and downs of President Trump? Especially with the medical center getting hit with the cut to federal grants, oil prices, you never know what's going to happen. Of course, tariffs are going to be impacting a lot of us. Can we withstand that here in Houston?
I just saw a report today that if you just look at the National Institutes of Health, which is the folks who fund that cancer research and a lot of the research that happens in TMC, Trump has cut $835 million, almost $1 billion worth of funding just in the healthcare sector. That's going to eliminate about 3,600 jobs that Texans are in right now. And that is just one government agency. San Antonio, which is very, very centered on the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, they've already seen $356 million worth of grants and contracts canceled just in the city of San Antonio.
Wow.
So when you're talking about numbers that large, combined with tariffs, combined with OPEC opening up the floodgates, putting more oil in the market and driving down the price of oil, what Trump's policies are currently doing is endangering the global economy, let alone the Texas economy. No economy can survive what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
So I think you're already seeing the White House back off a lot of this stuff, but it's a scary time. And when times get scary, this is when companies and executives stop doing stuff, right? They stop investing, they stop taking loans, they stop hiring new people, and they just freeze. And just by freezing in place, that can trigger a recession.
Yeah. Chris, all your anxiety and stress that you have when you're covering all of this is now firmly placed on my shoulders as well. So I want to end with something a bit more optimistic, right? And let's say for somehow, some way, if there isn't a recession and this plan that President Trump has, it actually works, and all of a sudden things are booming, we're in this golden age, what should we do in that time? Like, how do we spend our money? What are good things to do here? Because I need something positive, Chris.
Well, I want to go back to this idea that recessions are normal. It's a normal part of the economic cycle. And sometimes we have recessions and people don't even realize it. They're so minor, but it's part of the economic cycle. It's creative destruction. So when you do have an economic slowdown or a recession, zombie companies that really shouldn't exist, companies that were fraudulent, they go broke. And then people go start new companies. And it's the starting of new companies and building new things that really kind of builds the next boom time, right? And, we're seeing a little bit of that with artificial intelligence and Foxconn and companies setting up businesses here in Houston, which are going to diversify the economy. New people are still moving to Texas and starting businesses.
Okay.
So even if we have a recession, we're going to bounce back and we are going to recover and we'll have the boom times again. And my advice will be exactly the same then. Pay down your debts, invest in index funds, make sure you have a strong savings account, and be generous with your community because we're all in this together.
That's beautiful. That's perfect. And also take that 60th birthday party. It's all good.
Exactly.
You can definitely splurge. Where are you heading?
I'm going to go to Rio de Janeiro. Never been to Brazil before.
Well, you definitely deserve it. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all this great advice, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Raheel, for having me on. I'm happy to come back anytime.
That was Chris Tomlinson. You can read his work in the Houston Chronicle or with the link in our show notes. I want to hear from you. How much have your spending habits changed? Are you worried about a recession? Send us a message with the contact info in our show notes. We'd love to share it with other listeners in a future episode. Is it okay if I start the week by asking you a favor? Please help us grow the show by sharing this episode with 3 of your friends who live inside the loop and ask them to subscribe to CityCast Houston. You can also drop us a rating and review wherever you're listening right now. And of course, subscribe to the show if you're new here or a longtime listener. If you want even more Houston news, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, at houston.citycast.fm. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.